The house was too quiet. That was the first thing Sophie noticed. It wasn't the peaceful kind of quiet that comes after a long day, no, this was something else. It felt heavy, like the silence was listening. Watching. Waiting. Every time she stepped across the creaking floorboards of her small rented house in Los Angeles, she could swear the air around her shifted, reacting to her presence. I keep telling myself, it's just the house, she whispered under her breath, her voice trembling slightly. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. For the past 3 weeks, Sophie had been waking up in the middle of the night, same time, 3:11 a.m., with the same dream clawing at the back of her mind. The same red door. The same soft, echoing whispers that seemed to come from behind it. She'd never seen that door before in her waking life, but in the dream, she always knew exactly where it was. It was waiting for her. That night, she sat at her small wooden desk, sketching. Her fingers moved almost automatically, dragging charcoal across paper in jagged strokes. She wasn't sure what she was drawing until she pulled back and realized she'd drawn it again, the door. Deep crimson paint, cracked like dried blood. A black doorknob. And a faint shadow leaking from the edges, as if something inside was pushing to get out. She dropped the pencil, her heart racing. What's happening to me? The air suddenly grew cold. A chill crawled down her spine. Her window rattled softly though the night was still. The shadows in the corner seemed thicker, darker. Then came the whisper. It was faint at first, a woman's voice, trembling, distant, almost mournful. Sophie froze. Open it. Her breath hitched. Who's there? Silence. She backed away from the desk, eyes darting around the dim room. The voice hadn't come from outside, it had come from within the walls. The whisper returned, this time sharper, urgent. You've seen it before, you know where it leads. Her knees buckled slightly as she stumbled toward the light switch. The bulb flickered violently before bursting in a flash of glass and sparks. Darkness swallowed her. Her phone screen lit up on the desk, 3:11 a.m. Miles away, in a quiet suburban neighborhood, Josh Lambert woke up with a gasp. Sweat drenched his sheets. The same nightmare again, the door, the whispers, the feeling of falling through endless darkness. He sat up, clutching his chest. His therapist had told him the dreams were just his mind replaying trauma. That he'd sealed off that part of himself, the part that had touched the further. But Josh knew better. Every night, the shadows in his house moved just a little too much. Every night, he could hear faint footsteps in the hall when no one was there. And lately, he could hear her. Renee's voice. She'd been gone for almost a year now, taken too soon in an accident he still couldn't talk about. But sometimes, in the dead of night, he'd hear her humming the same lullaby she used to sing to Dalton. And every time he heard it, he'd see the door. That red door. Sophie sat huddled on the floor of her room, trembling. Her eyes were fixed on the sketch she'd made. It was different now. The door in the drawing had opened, just a crack. The charcoal had smeared across the paper, forming a shadowy outline of a face peering through the opening. Its eyes were hollow, wide, hungry. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello. There was a long pause. Then, a man's voice, shaky but familiar in some strange, bone-deep way. Is this Sophie Thatcher? She frowned. Who's this? My name is Josh Lambert, the voice said. I think we've both seen the same door. Her blood ran cold. How do you know about that? Because it's not a dream, Josh said quietly. It's a warning. Static crackled on the line, and then, faintly, so faintly that Sophie could barely hear it, came another voice behind his, whispering from the other side of the connection. The further didn't stay behind. Her hand trembled as she dropped the phone. In the silence that followed, she realized she could hear something new, a low creaking sound, coming from down the hall. Her bedroom door was slowly opening on its own. And beyond it, through the dim light of the corridor, she could see it. A faint, crimson glow at the end of the hallway. The red door. Waiting. Sophie couldn't move. Her breath came in short, ragged bursts as her wide eyes locked onto the faint, pulsing glow at the end of the hallway. The red door was there, impossibly there, where her hallway should have ended in a blank wall. Its cracked paint gleamed like wet blood under the dim light. Shadows seeped from its edges, curling like smoke, whispering things too soft to fully understand. It was the door from her dreams. She blinked once, and it vanished. The hallway was normal again. Her phone was still on the floor, screen flickering faintly. The last call with Josh Lambert had ended in static. But now, another message had appeared on the screen. Unknown number, don't go near it. Her trembling fingers dropped the phone again. She didn't need to be told twice. Across town, Josh Lambert sat in his car, parked in front of the same address he'd seen written on the old photo in his basement, an address that somehow matched the one that had appeared on his phone earlier that night, right after his strange call with Sophie. He didn't understand what was happening. For years, he'd tried to lock away the past, the astral projection, the further, all of it. He'd gone to therapy, taken medication, rebuilt his life. But after Renai's death, the door inside his mind had started to creak open again. And last night, he saw something that made his blood run cold. Dalton's paintings, the ones he'd kept boxed up in the attic, had changed. The paint had cracked, warped, and in the middle of the canvas, a red door had appeared. The same door from the further. The same one Sophie had described on the phone. He stepped out of the car, clutching a small silver cross that used to belong to Elise Rainier, the psychic who had once saved his family. The street was silent except for the distant hum of traffic. The air smelled faintly of smoke and rain. Josh hesitated for a long moment before knocking on the door. Inside, Sophie jumped at the sound. The knock echoed through the quiet house, low and hollow, like it came from somewhere beneath the walls. She grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the front door. Another knock. Louder. "Who is it?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "It's Josh Lambert," came the muffled reply. "We spoke earlier." She opened the door slowly, her eyes darting nervously behind him. The man looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his expression haunted. "You're really him," she said softly. "You saw it too, didn't you?" Josh nodded. "Yeah. And if it's showing up here, it means it's found a way back." They sat in the living room, the faint yellow glow from a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. Josh told her everything. About Dalton. About the further. About the red-faced demon that had once tried to take over his body. Sophie listened in silence, hands trembling as he spoke. She could feel it, the truth in his voice. The energy in the room shifted when he said the word further. It was as if the house remembered. Suddenly, the lamp flickered. The air grew cold again. The whisper returned, low, wet, crawling through the room. "You brought him back." Sophie's heart raced. "Did you hear that?" Josh's eyes went wide. "Yeah. It knows we're talking about it." The lamp flickered violently, then went out. The flashlight in Sophie's hand turned on by itself, the beam pointing toward the hallway. The red door was there again, fully visible this time, glowing brighter than before. Josh stood slowly. "It's not supposed to exist outside the further," he whispered. Unless. Unless what? Unless something tore the barrier. As he stepped closer, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the floor. The walls began to ripple like water, the pictures on them trembling in their frames. Sophie grabbed his arm. "Don't go near it." But he couldn't stop. He reached out, and the doorknob moved. Not by him. By something else. It turned with a slow, echoing click. The door opened, just an inch, and cold, black mist poured out, swallowing the light. From within, faint shapes began to move, faces half-formed, twisted in pain, whispering, reaching. Then came the sound of laughter. High-pitched, shrill, and inhuman. Josh staggered back, slamming the door shut with all his strength. The impact echoed like thunder. Sophie fell to the floor, gasping. What was that? Josh's hands were shaking. His eyes darted to the walls, where faint handprints were appearing, small, blackened, and spreading. It's the further, he said quietly. It didn't stay behind. Sophie looked at him, pale and terrified. Then what do we do? He met her eyes with the same dread he'd carried for years. We find Elisa's old recordings, he said. And we pray we're not already too late. Outside, across the street, a figure stood motionless beneath a flickering streetlight. Its face was pale. Its eyes were hollow. And as it watched Sophie's house, its mouth stretched slowly into a jagged, bloodless grin. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the curtains, but it didn't bring warmth. It felt pale, thin, fragile, like the world itself was holding its breath. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, staring blankly at a cup of untouched coffee. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw them, the hands, the faces, the whispering things behind the red door. Josh sat across from her, flipping through a box of dusty cassette tapes. The labels were faded, handwritten in Elise Rainier's neat script. Session 1, Dalton. Session 2, Astral Passage. Session 3, The Further, Field Notes. This was all in her old storage locker, Josh said, his voice tired. When Elise died, Tucker and Specs packed up everything. I don't think anyone ever listened to these. He slipped one into the old tape recorder. The static hissed, then Elisa's familiar voice came through, calm, gentle, but tinged with warning. The further isn't bound by time or space. It's a realm of the lost, drawn to fear, guilt, and sorrow. When a door opens, it doesn't close, it waits. Sophie shivered. That's exactly what's happening, isn't it? The door was never closed. Josh nodded slowly. It's been waiting for years, for someone who could see it again. She looked at him, dread washing over her. Me. Later that afternoon, they drove to Elisa's old house, the one she used as her paranormal base of operations. The building was abandoned now, dust thick on every surface, windows boarded, but Sophie felt something the moment she stepped inside. A pulse. A vibration in the air. The same energy she'd felt in her nightmares. Josh moved carefully through the hall, the floorboards creaking beneath his boots. This place. I thought I'd never come back here. They entered Elisa's reading room. The old photographs still lined the walls, images of possessed faces, of dark figures caught in mirrors. And in the center of the room stood the old seance table, still set with candles melted to their stubs. Sophie brushed her hand along the table. The wood was cold. She fought this thing for years, didn't she? Josh nodded. She tried to warn me. She said the further doesn't just attach itself to people, it infests bloodlines. The room grew colder. A faint hum filled the air, low and metallic, like distant machinery. Then they heard it, Elisa's voice. Soft at first, then clearer. Josh. They froze. The voice came from the far corner of the room, where a large mirror hung cracked and covered in dust. Sophie stepped closer, wiping a section clean. There she was. Elise. Her reflection flickered in the glass, translucent, pale, her eyes filled with both sorrow and urgency. Elise? Josh whispered. Her reflection looked directly at him. It's feeding again, Josh. You've brought it back. The door must never open. Sophie's throat tightened. How do we stop it? Elisa's image began to distort, her voice trembling. You can't destroy it, you must seal it with what it wants most. What does that mean? Josh asked. The reflection began to ripple violently, her mouth twisting into a silent scream. It's already inside. The mirror shattered with a deafening crash. The lights flickered out. Sophie screamed as icy air swept through the room. The walls began to warp, the furniture bending in impossible shapes. The air was thick with whispers, hundreds of voices murmuring over each other, pleading, crying, laughing. Josh grabbed her arm. Stay close. From the shards of the mirror, something began to crawl out, long black limbs, thin as wires, emerging one by one. A face followed, pale and eyeless, its mouth stretching open into a grin far too wide. Sophie's voice broke. What is that? Josh backed away, shaking. It's one of them. It's from the further. The creature stepped fully into the room, its skin flickering like static. With each movement, the air distorted around it, lights bending. It whispered in a voice that seemed to echo from inside their skulls. You opened the door, now we can see you. Sophie felt something cold wrap around her ankle. She looked down, black tendrils, like smoke made solid, were crawling up her leg. She kicked frantically, screaming. Josh! Help! He lunged forward, grabbing her hand. Together they pulled free and stumbled toward the door. The entity shrieked, the sound splitting the air like glass. They slammed the door behind them, hearts pounding. Outside, Sophie collapsed against the wall, trembling violently. That wasn't just a ghost, she gasped. That was something else. Josh stared at the door, still shaking. That was a hunter. They guard the further. If it's here. He looked at her, realization dawning. It means the red door isn't just open anymore, he said. It's bleeding through. Far away, back in Sophie's house, the red door pulsed faintly in the dark hallway, its cracks glowing like veins. From behind it, something breathed. And for the first time in years, a single, familiar hand pressed against the door from the inside, thin, burned, and trembling. The demon was awake again. Night fell like a curtain of ash. The sky outside Elisa's abandoned home was ink black, the moon hidden behind heavy clouds. Sophie sat in the front seat of Josh's car, her eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. She could still see it, that pale, eyeless thing crawling out of the mirror, its voice a hollow echo inside her skull. Josh sat beside her, hands gripping the steering wheel tight enough for his knuckles to whiten. Neither of them had spoken for nearly 10 minutes. The silence between them was thick, uneasy, as if speaking aloud might summon it again. Finally, Josh broke the quiet. We need to burn the place down. Sophie turned to him, her voice shaking. You think fire can stop something that doesn't exist in this world? He looked at her, tired eyes full of guilt. It worked once. When Elise faced the lipstick-faced demon, she burned the connection point. But that thing, Sophie whispered, it wasn't just in the house. It was everywhere. I felt it. Josh didn't argue. He knew she was right. The further wasn't confined by walls or distance. When it found a doorway, it spread, through dreams, through memories, through the people who opened it. And now it had found her. They drove through the night to Sophie's house, the one where the first manifestation had appeared. But when they arrived, the air was different. Heavier. Colder. Sophie's breath came out in clouds. The front door was slightly open, moving back and forth in the wind. I locked it, she whispered. Josh motioned for her to stay behind him as he stepped inside. The house was dark, silent except for a low hum, not quite sound, but more like vibration. Every picture frame on the wall was tilted. Every shadow seemed alive. Then they saw it. The red door. It was no longer at the end of the hallway, it was in the living room, standing upright, freestanding, impossible. Its surface pulsed faintly like living flesh. Sophie's legs almost gave out. "Oh my God!" The whispers returned, soft and layered, speaking in overlapping tones. "You shouldn't have looked, you shouldn't have answered." Josh approached slowly, each step feeling heavier, like he was wading through invisible water. The air smelled of burnt wood and rot. His eyes locked onto the black doorknob. And then, a voice from behind the door, clear, human, and horribly familiar. "Josh, help me." His heart stopped. It was Renee's voice. He stumbled backward, shaking his head. "No. No, that's not possible." Sophie looked at him, terrified. "Who is it?" "My wife." The voice came again, pleading this time. "It's so dark in here, Josh, please, open the door." He took another step forward before Sophie grabbed his arm. "That's not her. You said the further mimics voices, right? It feeds on that." He stared at the door, breathing hard. The voice sounded so real, so desperate. But beneath it, faintly, there was another sound. Laughter. Soft. Wet. Childlike. Josh's expression hardened. "You're right." He reached into his pocket, pulling out Elisa's old cross pendant. It gleamed faintly in the dim light. As he raised it toward the door, the whispers turned violent, screeching, snarling, overlapping until it was unbearable. The walls shook. The floor splintered beneath their feet. Sophie covered her ears, screaming. "Josh, it's angry." The red door began to bleed. Thick black liquid oozed from its cracks, running down onto the floor like tar. From within, hands began pressing against the surface, dozens of them, clawing, stretching, desperate to escape. Then, without warning, the doorknob turned by itself. Josh grabbed Sophie and pulled her back, but the door swung open with a blast of icy wind. The lights shattered. And from the darkness beyond, a shape crawled through. It was tall, impossibly thin, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its skin looked burned, flaking off in sheets. A mouth stretched across its face where no mouth should be, filled with black teeth. It moved like smoke and bone all at once, every step cracking like glass. Sophie's voice broke into a whisper. "It followed us." The creature cocked its head toward her, sniffing the air like a predator. Then it spoke. "You brought the light back. Now we see you clearly." Josh stepped in front of her, holding up the cross. "You can't have her." The thing tilted its head further, its smile widening. "You still think you're the one it wants." The words hit him like ice. Sophie's eyes widened in horror as the creature's shadow stretched across the floor, reaching for Josh, wrapping around his legs like tendrils. He screamed as the air rippled, his body convulsing. For a split second, Sophie saw something inside him, a flicker of the man he used to be, twisted by something unseen. She grabbed him by the shoulders, shouting his name. "Josh! Fight it!" His eyes snapped open, but they were no longer his. For an instant, they glowed black. Then he exhaled a deep, rattling breath, and everything went still. The red door slammed shut on its own. Sophie backed away, trembling. "Josh!" He turned toward her slowly, expression blank, voice low and cold. "She's waiting for you now, Sophie." And then he smiled. The same jagged grin she'd seen in her dreams. For a long moment, Sophie couldn't move. Josh just stood there, half in shadow, half lit by the faint flicker of the broken lamp. His expression was wrong, empty, frozen, like a photograph that had begun to decay. "Josh," she whispered. He blinked once, slowly. His head tilted to one side, that same faint smile stretched across his lips. "You shouldn't have come here, Sophie." Her throat went dry. You said it followed us, what did you mean? Josh's smile twitched, his voice deepening slightly, layered now with another tone, low, echoing, distorted. It doesn't follow. It waits. A sudden gust of air swept through the room, snuffing out the last remaining light. The house plunged into darkness. Sophie stumbled backward, fumbling for her phone's flashlight. The beam illuminated Josh's face, his eyes now completely black, swirling faintly like smoke trapped under glass. "Oh my God," she breathed. "Josh, please." His mouth opened slightly, but the voice that came out wasn't his. "He's still here, but not for long." The beam flickered, and when it steadied, Josh was gone. Sophie's pulse pounded in her ears. She spun in every direction, searching, calling his name. No answer. Then she heard it, the sound of scratching coming from the ceiling. Slow, deliberate. Like fingernails dragging through wood. She raised the light upward. Something moved above, crawling. The ceiling boards groaned under shifting weight. Then, a face dropped down from the darkness, hanging upside down only inches from hers. It was Josh, his eyes wide, mouth split unnaturally open, whispering in two voices at once. "You opened it. You let them in." She screamed and fell backward as he dropped to the floor in front of her, landing with a sickening crack but standing up as if nothing had happened. His movements were jerky, puppet-like. Sophie scrambled toward the door, but it slammed shut on its own. Every window in the house followed suit, bang, 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 until the room was sealed. She pressed herself against the wall, shaking. "You're not Josh. What did you do to him?" The thing smiled. "He's home. I just borrowed the rest." Then it lunged. Sophie ducked, barely dodging as the possessed body crashed into the table, splintering it in two. She grabbed one of the broken wooden legs, clutching it like a weapon. "Stay away," she cried. It laughed, a deep, hollow sound that seemed to come from every direction. The room pulsed with invisible energy, lights flickered even though there were none left to flicker. Sophie's ears rang. Her vision blurred. Then, for a heartbeat, the darkness shifted, and she saw them. Shadows all around her, moving just outside the circle of her light. Dozens of them. Twisted, faceless silhouettes crawling across the walls and ceiling. The air was thick with whispers. "Join us, join us." Sophie covered her ears, screaming. "Get out of my head." Something grabbed her wrist, hard. She looked up to see Josh's face again. But it was changing. The skin along his jaw split like wet paper, black smoke spilling out. His voice came through in pieces. "Sophie, it's still me." Her heart twisted. "Josh, fight it. Please, don't let it take you." For a moment, she saw him, his real self, flickering through the dark possession like a candle behind glass. Tears welled in his eyes. "It wants you, not me," he gasped. "It's using me to get to you." Then the darkness swallowed him whole again. His head jerked violently to the side. Enough. He lifted his hand, and every shadow in the room moved with him. The floorboards cracked as if something beneath them was trying to crawl out. The red door began to manifest again, right there in the middle of the living room. Its surface glistened, breathing like a living organ. Sophie screamed as unseen hands grabbed her ankles, pulling her toward it. She kicked, thrashed, clawed at the floor. Josh stood over her, face blank, voice deep and resonant. "She's waiting for you on the other side." She reached for her phone, desperate, and hit play on the last tape Elise had recorded. A woman's voice filled the air, Elise's voice, soft but commanding. "If you hear me, you must listen. When the door calls your name, do not answer. When the darkness reaches, do not look back." The words filled the room like fire. Josh screamed, clutching his head. The shadows recoiled, hissing. The red door flickered. Sophie grabbed the pendant from his neck, the silver cross Elise had given him, and pressed it against his chest. "Come back, Josh." He convulsed, screaming, one voice human, one demonic, both breaking apart. The lights exploded. The entire house seemed to shake. Then, silence. Josh collapsed to the ground, motionless. Sophie crawled toward him, shaking him by the shoulders. "Josh, please." His eyes opened. Normal. Blue again. He looked at her weakly. "It's not gone." "What do you mean?" she whispered. He turned his head toward the hallway, toward the faint red glow spilling through the crack beneath the door. "It's coming through." Outside, the streetlights went out one by one. The wind stopped. And in every house on the block, people began to whisper in their sleep. The world outside had gone unnaturally still. No traffic. No hum of electricity. No sound at all except the faint, rhythmic whispering that drifted through Sophie's cracked window, hundreds of voices, murmuring in perfect unison. Josh stood weakly beside her, his face pale and drenched in sweat. His eyes were wide, haunted. He'd been silent since the possession broke, staring at the glowing crack under the hallway door. The faint red light pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "It's not supposed to spread this far," he said finally, his voice trembling. "The further is, leaking." Sophie looked out the window. The street beyond was dark. Houses stood like hollow silhouettes, and behind their windows, faint shadows shifted. People, no, things, were moving inside. "It's already in the neighborhood," she whispered. Josh turned toward her. "The door didn't just open for you or me. It opened for everyone." They searched Elisa's old recordings for answers. Static. Fragments of her voice, breaking in and out. Then one phrase came through clearly, sharper than the rest, urgent, pleading. "If the door spreads beyond its keeper, you must enter the further itself, and seal it from within." Sophie's stomach turned cold. "You mean go in there?" Josh nodded grimly. "It's the only way." "But what if we can't come back?" He looked at her, eyes full of quiet resignation. "Then at least it stops here." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The air around them felt heavier with every passing second, the walls groaning softly, as if the house were breathing. Then Sophie whispered, "How do we get in?" Josh picked up the lantern Elise had once used for astral work. The glass was cracked, but the faint blue glow inside it still shimmered. "Through sleep," he said. "Through separation." They set up the seance in the living room, surrounded by candles. The red light from the hallway bled faintly into the room, crawling across the floor like liquid. Sophie sat cross-legged on the floor, her hands trembling as she clutched Elisa's pendant. Josh placed the lantern in the center. Its glow flickered weakly, casting moving shadows on their faces. "Close your eyes," he said. "Whatever you hear, don't let it pull you away from me." Sophie nodded, tears streaking her cheeks. "Okay." He began to hum softly, an old tune Elise once used to guide lost souls. It was low, almost comforting, until the air began to hum back. The temperature dropped. Candles shuddered violently. Then, the world tilted. A sharp ringing filled Sophie's ears. Her chest tightened, breath freezing in her lungs. And then everything stopped. When she opened her eyes, the world was wrong. The colors were muted, washed of life. The air was thick, heavy, like water. The red door now stood before them, enormous and pulsing faintly like the heart of something living. Behind them stretched a vast landscape of darkness, shifting shapes, broken rooms, fragments of memories suspended. In midair. The further. Sophie's voice cracked. "Oh God, this is real." Josh looked different here, his outline faintly glowing, his features sharp and hollow. "We don't have much time. The door's expanding. It's feeding off every soul it's touched." He moved toward it, but the ground beneath them rippled. From the shadows, figures began to crawl. Whispering. Their faces were blank, stretched tight like wax masks. Their fingers long and blackened. They surrounded Sophie, their movements twitching, unnatural. You opened it. You belong here now. Join us in the dark. Sophie screamed and stumbled back. One of them reached for her wrist, its touch cold and wet, and she felt her heartbeat stutter. Josh swung the lantern, light flaring blue and driving the creatures back momentarily. They're the lost, he shouted. Souls that never escaped. A low, rumbling laugh filled the air, familiar, guttural, mocking. You think you can close what's already part of you? From behind the red door, a black hand reached through, thin, bony, nails sharp as blades. Then another. And another. Until the demon itself stepped forward, its face burning through the dark like coal, eyes glowing yellow, mouth split from ear to ear. The lipstick-faced demon. Sophie froze. Every nightmare, every whisper, every shadow had led to this. Josh lifted the lantern, his voice shaking. It's him. He's the one holding the door open. The demon tilted its head. You left me behind, Lambert. But I never left you. Josh's body trembled as the demon's laughter filled the air. His form began to flicker, his outline weakening. Sophie ran to him. Josh. Stay with me. I'm fine, he rasped, but blood began to drip from his nose. The further was feeding on him again, pulling him apart from the inside. The demon's grin widened. She's the one who dreams, not you. She's the new door. Sophie felt a violent tug in her chest, like invisible hands clawing at her ribs. The red door's glow brightened, and a long crack appeared across its surface, shaped like her silhouette. No, she screamed. I won't be your doorway. She raised Elisa's pendant high, pressing it against the light. It flared white, pure, and searing. The demon shrieked, retreating, smoke pouring from its wounds. Josh fell to his knees, gasping. You did it, keep going. Sophie forced herself forward, tears streaming down her face. She placed her hand on the red door. It burned. I seal this in light, she whispered, her voice trembling. You can't have me. The door pulsed once, twice, and then exploded in a wave of crimson light. When the light faded, the further was silent. The whispers were gone. Sophie looked around. Did it work? Josh smiled faintly, exhausted. I think so. But then he looked down, and realized his hand was turning to ash. She reached for him. Josh, no. He shook his head, smiling sadly. You closed it. You saved them. But I can't go back again. The darkness began to swallow him. Sophie's voice broke. Please don't leave me here alone. He touched her face gently, whispering, You won't be alone. Not for long. And then, he was gone. The red door was sealed. But deep in the silence of the further, beneath the ashes of broken souls, something began to move. A new door began to form, black this time. Waiting. Sophie woke up screaming. Her body convulsed, gasping for air as she shot upright in bed. Morning light leaked through the blinds, cold and gray. She looked around the room, her room, and for one brief, fragile second, she thought it was over. The candles were gone. The walls were clean. The red glow had vanished. But when she turned toward the mirror, she froze. Her reflection was smiling. Not her. Not really. The corners of its mouth lifted slowly, unnaturally high, while her own lips remained still. Then the reflection leaned closer, whispering from behind the glass. You sealed the wrong door. The room fell silent. The mirror cracked. And the whispering began again. Days passed, but Sophie didn't sleep. The nightmares didn't wait for her to close her eyes anymore. Shadows followed her around corners. Every reflection, mirrors, windows, water, showed faint glimpses of something standing behind her. At night, she heard scratching beneath the floorboards. Low humming in the vents. The same humming Elise once used to reach the further. She tried to ignore it, to live, to pretend. But every time she blinked, she saw flashes of that black door. Not the red one. This one was deeper. Colder. Alive. She started drawing it, obsessively, on napkins, notebooks, even the walls. Each time, her hand shook violently, as though something inside her wanted to come through. When she finally called Dalton Lambert, her voice was hollow, shaking. "Dalton," she whispered, "it didn't end. There's another door." Dalton was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, he said, "My father's been gone for a week. He hasn't come back from the coma." Sophie's blood ran cold. "He's still there, in the further." Dalton's voice cracked. "And something's been standing in his hospital room every night. A shadow. Tall. Watching." They met that night. Dalton brought his old sketchbook, the one he'd used as a child to draw the further. He flipped through pages filled with red doors, black smoke, and monstrous faces. But at the back, there was something new. Something he didn't remember drawing. It was a door entirely black, surrounded by hundreds of faint human silhouettes, hands pressed against it from the other side. Sophie stared at it, her voice trembling. "That's it. That's the door for my dreams." Dalton swallowed hard. "Then we have to go back in." Sophie shook her head violently. "No, Josh barely made it out. The further wants us dead. If we open another door." Dalton looked up at her, his eyes full of grief. "If we don't, it'll open itself." And then the lights went out. The house fell into darkness. Something creaked in the hallway. Dalton held the lantern tight, its faint glow the only source of light. The air grew cold, so cold their breath hung in front of them like fog. Then the floor beneath Sophie's feet split open. A deep, guttural scream filled the air as hands, black, smoke-like hands, burst through, grabbing her ankles, pulling her down. "Dalton," she screamed, clawing at the floor. He reached for her, shouting, but the light flickered, and she was gone. Sophie fell through darkness. Screaming. Clawing. And then she landed. The further. Again. But this time, it wasn't like before. The place was colder, emptier. The air hummed with something vast and malevolent. Ahead of her, half buried in the fog, stood the black door. It was massive, pulsing faintly, as though something inside was breathing. Around it, figures knelt, souls that once belonged to the living. Their eyes were empty sockets, their mouths moving silently in prayer. Sophie stepped forward, trembling. "I sealed the red door," she whispered. "What are you?" The door's surface began to ripple. And from within, a voice spoke, low, ancient, echoing through her bones. "The red door was never mine. I am what came before. The darkness beneath the further. The place even demons fear." Sophie's heartbeat thundered in her ears. "You can't have me. I'm not your door." The voice laughed softly, the sound like cracking wood. "You already opened me. Every fear, every dream, every whisper you ignored, I've been watching. Waiting. You brought me through." The black surface split open like flesh. A single yellow eye stared out. Sophie stumbled back, screaming as the kneeling figures rose, limbs stretching, faces warping, mouths opening into endless voids. They surrounded her, whispering in perfect unison. She opened it. She opened the black door. Sophie clutched Elisa's pendant, pressing it against her chest. "Light, bring the light." The pendant flickered weakly, glowing white. The shadows shrieked, retreating, but the eye widened, and a hand burst through the door, grabbing her by the throat. Josh's voice echoed faintly through the dark, distant and broken. "Sophie, run." She turned toward the sound, but the door pulled her in. Her body vanished into the darkness as the black door sealed shut, leaving only silence. In the hospital, Josh Lambert's eyes snapped open. He gasped, trembling, heart monitor screaming. Dalton rushed to his side. "Dad! You're back." Josh looked at him slowly, his eyes hollow, unfocused. His voice came out flat. "Where is she?" Dalton hesitated. "Sophie's gone. She didn't make it back." Josh stared at the ceiling, his expression unreadable. Then, after a long pause, he whispered something so quietly that Dalton barely heard it. "She didn't seal it, she became it." That night, as Dalton sat alone in his art studio, his lamp flickered once. Then, faintly, on the wall behind him, a shadow began to stretch, taller, darker, its outline shifting. A whisper echoed from the corner of the room. "The black door is open." Dalton turned, heart pounding. There, reflected in his studio mirror, stood Sophie, her eyes black, her smile wide and inhuman. "I told you," she whispered. "It wasn't the house." The light went out.